Beyond the western fens and broken causeways lies a monastery that does not heal and where knowledge is locked away. From its depths comes a drink not meant for pleasure. This is the story of Frostfire Winterbrandy, read from the account of the man who, in creating it, discovered why it was never meant to be enjoyed.
I did not know Greyholt by sight when they sent for me. No one did. Not in the way you know a market town or a riverside crossing. Greyholt was known by both the things that left it and the things that did not. Strange books passed from hand to hand, a scholar returning with new words in his mouth, a rumour that travelled farther than any monk ever did. It lay far to the west, they said, beyond the misted fens, a monastery spoken of with both reverence and unease. My name is Eadnoth. I was a distiller before Greyholt took notice of me, and I remained one after it turned its back. I had made winterbrandy for ordinary reasons, for the ache in the bones that comes from wet cold, for a farmer's coin at the end of a hard month, for weddings and wakes, and for men who wanted a hard swallow before stepping back out into the dark. Mine was not feigned. It was steady. It did what it promised. It did not drift sweetly into the head, or invite a man to talk more than he should, any more than ale. Greyholt somehow discovered it. The message came as any other. A folded sheet, plain wax and no crest. It was carried by a messenger who waited just long enough to make sure that I took it, then departed. It was not an invitation, it was a summons, dressed as a choice. It named my craft and stated a date by which I should be ready to leave. It did not mention payment, but it promised that I would be compensated. What were the words? Yes, in appropriate measure. It asked whether I could keep silent when required, and whether I could travel without asking what I would find. It ended with a line I still recall, because it was the first time I felt Greyholt's hand close around me. If you accept, come alone. I read it twice, set it down, walked to my room, and stood there among the copper and the damp wood, listening to the emptiness. I was neither foolish nor brave. I had learned long ago that those are often the same thing, and considered what refusal might mean if Greyholt truly was what people said. That night I slept badly, but the following morning I packed what a distiller needs: a clean blade, some notes, and a few tools that likely fit my hand better than any Greyholt could offer. The road west was not kind, but the causeways of the old barrows were worse. The land there was out of joint. When Greyholt finally rose out of the fog, it looked like a giant stone refusal. There were no banners, nothing carved, no welcoming arch. The gate was shut until I stood before it. Then it swung open. The courtyard was gravel and stone, with a few black-limbed trees. The monks moved through it in their grey robes, but none greeted me. I waited until the man came out. He wore no adornments of rank, but his posture did the work for him. He looked at my hands first, then my face. "Eadnoth, presumably?" he said. "Yes." "You understand where you are?" "I understand what people say." "Come," he said. He led me through corridors, and I observed that Greyholt was not rich in the way lords are rich. There were no tapestries, no gold, no plush seats. Everything was functional. We passed a locked door, and I felt, absurdly, the urge to slow and listen. The monk noticed my tiny hesitation. "Do not," he said, not harshly, It was simply a statement of the rules. I followed on, and he took me to a stair that spiraled downward. When we reached the bottom, the famous Deepcellars opened before me, and my first thought was that the word cellar was wrong. The space was cut into the earth with ancient care. Arches supported the ceiling, and in alcoves stood casks and jars, but also a copper apparatus that felt somewhat familiar. "You will work here," the monk said. "You will use what you know and, mark me, you will not improvise." I looked at him. "If I'm here to work, I will need to understand what you want." "We want a winterbrandy that does not invite." "Invite what?" He thought about it. Then, deciding I had earned only this much, he said, "Drift." That was the first time I felt the objective in Greyholt's mind. I began with what I had always begun with: grain, water, heat, and patience. The first runs were ordinary enough, strong, clean, and sharp on the tongue. Greyholt's people came, tasted, nodded, but offered no praise. A few days in, I realized I was being watched. Not constantly, not in the crude way of guards. Men passed through the Deepcellars and loitered near the workspace without pretending otherwise. Some were monks. Some wore plain leather. None of them spoke much. One of them, a man with a scar that ran from his ear to his jaw, stood near the cooling coil one evening as I checked the temperature by touch. "You're the distiller?" he asked. "I am." He looked at the copper. "Can you make it quieter?" "Quieter how?" "Not gone," he said. "Just held back." I understood then that this was not about warmth. This was not about trade. Greyholt had not brought me here to make a better drink. It had brought me here to make something that blocked life. I told him, "Drink can blunt, it can numb, it can make men careless." He shook his head. "Careless gets men killed." And then he left. That night, alone in the Deepcellars, I sat with that conversation whirling around my head. I had made drink for grief before. I had made drink for loneliness, for celebration, for boredom. I had never made drink for containment, not consciously. The second week, the monk who oversaw the cellars returned while I was adjusting the cut. He watched, and when I set aside a portion that would have given warmth and a sweet edge, he nodded. "You learn," he said. "I'm removing what makes it pleasant," I replied. "That is the point." I found myself bristling. "People drink for pleasure." "People drink for many reasons," he said, and let the remarks sit there like a closed door. I worked, and Greyholt's cold became a part of it. In my own still room, warmth was always a factor. The room breathed with heat. Here, the Deepcellars resisted it. The spirit that came off the still carried that same restraint. It was sharp, and it stayed sharp. It did not mellow kindly in the barrel as mine did. It held its bite. I tried making it stronger first, thinking strength might overwhelm memory by sheer force. That was a mistake. The men who drank it grew too loose. Their eyes became unfocused, their laughter sounded wrong, and they became unsteady. The scarred man returned the next day and handed back the cup after one swallow. "That's not it," he said. "What does it do?" I asked. He stared at the liquid. "It makes the edges louder," he said, and his hand trembled. I adjusted again. Less strength, less sweetness, less warmth, more clarity. I filtered more thoroughly. I kept the cut narrower. I let the spirit stay lean and unforgiving. The result was unpleasant, and I knew it. It took the tongue like cold fire and burned. It did not spread warmth through the belly. It sharpened sensation. The first time the scarred man drank the new batch, he did not finish the cup. He swallowed, breathed out slowly, and sat very still. Eventually, he nodded. "That holds." "What does it hold?" I asked, though I already knew. He looked at me, not angry, just tired, and that was a warning. "Don't ask me that," he said. That was the first time Greyholt's rule reached me from a mouth that didn't belong to a monk. Some questions were not forbidden by discipline alone. They were forbidden by mercy. The monks began bottling the spirit in flasks. Jet black, thick, lightless. Night glass, they called it. It made the spirit inside feel less like a drink and more like a secret. I touched one and felt how cool it remained even in my warm hands. "It must be carried without light," the overseeing monk said. "Why?" I asked. "It dulls," he replied. "Warmth dulls. Seeing invites thought. We do not invite." To him, that was the most ordinary remark in the world. I realized then that Greyholt did not treat containment as a response to unusual men. It treated containment as the proper order of things. The name came from the drinkers, not the monks. I heard it spoken one night when I had lingered near the casks, checking a seal, pretending I was not listening. Two men in plain leather sat at a side table. "Frostfire," one said. "That's what it is. Cold going down, burning after." I disliked the name from the first. It was too poetic for what I had made. But it was accurate, and the name stuck. I did not drink Frostfire to begin with. I told myself it was not for me, that I was here to make it, not to need it. I had always been careful with drink. I knew what it did to men who were trying to outrun something. But Greyholt has a way of stripping your excuses down to their bones. The Deepcellars were cold, and the work was exacting. The monastery did not press me with questions, but it pressed in other ways. Its silence seeped into me. Its locked doors made my thoughts gallop. One night, after a long run and a small failure that had cost me hours, I returned to my narrow quarters and found myself unable to lie still. My mind drifted to thoughts of loss and pain, and I returned to the deep cellars where the casks stood like sleeping beasts. The night glass flasks were stored in a locked chest. I did not have a key. But Greyholt had never treated my access as a test. The monk who oversaw the cellars had left the key where it could be found. That tells me they had anticipated the moment. I stood with the key in my hand, wanting to put it back and return to my bed. Another part, older and less proud, felt differently. The flasks lay in the chest like pieces of night. I took one and poured a measure into a cup that was meant for tasting. Lifting it, I hesitated, knowing the act of choosing could still be undone. Then I drank. The first swallow was shock, a cold that burned. It caught my throat and made my eyes water. My hands clenched on the cup. The drink demanded my attention. I stood there in the deep cellars, pinned to myself, and understood in a single, ugly clarity what I had made. This was not pleasure. This was not warmth. This was a tool that kept a man from leaving his own skin when his mind tried to tear him out of it. I set the cup down and stared at my shaking hands until they stopped. When the overseeing monk appeared at the edge of the lantern light, I did not startle. He watched me a moment, then said, "Now you know." I swallowed, throat still raw. "It's harsh," I said. "It must be," he replied. "It doesn't take it away." "The memory," I said. "No," he said again, an approval in the plainness of his voice. "It holds." In the days that followed, I watched the men who drank Frostfire with a new eye. They drank carefully. 1 swallow, 2, never a third unless the night demanded it. I also began to see what it took from them. It steadied them, yes. It kept their hands from shaking. It kept their eyes from going far away. It allowed them to sit in a warm room among others without the past pushing forward into the present. But it altered them. Some became quieter. Some laughed less. Some stopped telling stories, even harmless ones. Frostfire did not numb them into cheer. It disciplined them into survival. One evening, I saw the scarred man sit by the hearth while a pair of travellers sang a crude song and everyone else laughed. He did not laugh. He did not frown. He sat with his cup and watched the fire like he was watching his work. I found myself thinking that Greyholt had not saved these men. It had taught them how to remain usable. Frostfire began to leave Greyholt in the flasks, not in crates or barrels. 1 flask here, 2 there. It moved with trusted travellers and monks, and reached taverns that understood discretion. It did not become a common drink or a fashionable one. Those who drank it did not praise its flavour, and no one boasted of it. My work in the Deepcellars continued until the process was fixed and Greyholt no longer needed my judgment. There was no warning when they decided I was done. One morning, the overseeing monk came to me, watched me check a seal, then said, "You will leave at noon." I looked up, my hands still on the copper. "Just like that?" "Just like that," he replied. "Why bring me here at all?" I asked, and immediately regretted it. "Because you could make it, and because you could understand what it was." "And now?" I said. "Now you have." And he left. I left Greyholt the way I entered it, through plain corridors, the courtyard, and the gate. The road east felt longer, and the broken causeways of the old barrows felt almost welcoming in their simple hostility. Yet I did not return unchanged. I carried no book of secret knowledge. I carried no new language. I carried something heavier. The understanding that a monastery could build a drink the way it built a rule, not to delight or tempt, to contain. I carried the knowledge of what it cost, and the unadorned truth that I had paid some of that cost myself. I returned to my still and made ordinary winterbrandy again for ordinary reasons. People drank it and smiled and warmed and spoke too freely. Now and then, in cold seasons, I would hear of Frostfire passing through. A black flask glimpsed in a coat. A man in a tavern taking a single swallow and then sitting very still. No one would reveal it in the wrong company. No one would ask where it came from. Greyholt remains where it has always been, its locked halls containing what it contains. I do not pretend to know its whole purpose. I only know this small piece of it, cut and cooled and poured through my hands. Frostfire was never meant as pleasure. It was never meant to be enjoyed. It was meant to keep memories from spilling into a room and breaking a man in front of witnesses. It was meant to quiet the edges without erasing what lay within. It was meant to turn the body into an anchor when the mind tried to run. If that sounds like mercy, it is a hard mercy. If it sounds like cruelty, it is a controlled cruelty. Perhaps it is both. And perhaps Greyholt knows that better than any of us. I only know that when I first perfected it, I believed I was making a drink. Later, I understood I had made a kind of gate, a way to step back from the brink without pretending the brink was not there. And that is why it travels in night glass, unseen and passed quietly from hand to hand. Because it is not a taste, it is a function. And functions, in a place like the Marchlands, are rarely pretty.
So, Frostfire winterbrandy was never meant to be collected, traded, or spoken of with admiration. Yet time has polished its edges, and men now seek it for reasons it was never built to serve. That is the cost of letting a thing out into the world. If there is regret in this tale, it lies in the wanting, not the making.